So I have proposed a wealth tax. It's now time to do that.
Medicare for all is comprehensive. It covers all health care needs.
I'm not going to support any plan that rips away quality health care from individuals.
If you cross the border illegally, you should be able to be sent back. It's a crime.
We've got to fill these factories that in Detroit and Youngstown that used to make cars and steel. We've got to fill them with workers who are making electric vehicles, batteries, charging stations.
2020 Democrats shared their visions for the future with a lot of talk about policy. And in a jump ball election with no incumbent and with a typical politician on the other side, maybe that would be A-OK. But Donald Trump is the incumbent. The 2020 election should be a referendum on him and on Trumpism. Trumpism is not this inherently sort of normal political system. It's an emotional, almost religious movement. It's not rooted in policy or logic, but rather in rage about the changing face of America. And as anti-racism educator Tim Wise told me last week, endless talk about how the Democrats' policies differ from Trump's or differ from Obama's only serves to normalize him.
They're bringing spreadsheets to a gunfight, right?
Yeah.
They're bringing debate evidence to a gunfight rather than understanding this is about values, the values that we care about as a country, as opposed to the values that Trumpism represents.
Joining me now is Tara Dowdell of the Tara Dowdell Group, Jason Johnson of TheRoot.com, and Democratic pollster Cornell Belcher, author of A Black Man in the White House. Thank you all for being here. And I don't know whether you guys agree with me or Anand. He makes a very compelling case. But Tara, I have to go back to the few number of people who've been able to unseat an incumbent. It's very rare to unseat an incumbent. They almost always win. Here's somebody who did it. This is Bill Clinton in 1992. And I'm not saying run a 1992 style campaign. Things are very different, but here is how he did it. Let's first play part one of what I think people should do. Tell us why the incumbent should not be president anymore. Here it is.
Remember,
and if you elect me president, you will be better off 4 years from now than you are today.
average family income down $1,600 in 2 years.
You will be better off 4 years from now than you are today.
Family health care costs up $1,800 in 4 years.
You will be better off 4 years.
The second biggest tax increase in history.
If you elect me president, you will be better off 4 years from now than you are today.
Well, it's 4 years later. How you doing?
Okay, that was the first ad that you look at that C-SPAN reel of all of his ads. That's the first, and he hit him. Why the guy that's in there should no longer be there. Now, part two, tell me how you are going to do it better. Here it is.
Bill Clinton's economic plan, endorsed by over 600 economists, including 10 Nobel Prize winners, as the best hope for reviving the nation's economy. More than 400 of America's most respected business leaders say the Clinton plan will create jobs. A panel of independent experts convened by Time magazine concludes that Clinton's plan has the best solutions to our economic problems. And now even the author of Ross Perot's plan has endorsed Bill Clinton for president. Let's get our economy moving again.
Tara Dowdell, my political consultant friend, those were very effective. And yet, Bill Clinton squeaked past the incumbent. Okay, he was not popular, George Herbert Walker Bush, because taxes had gone up. Bill Clinton managed to win 43% of the vote, and he managed to get a pretty big electoral college route. But, you know, he didn't overwhelmingly beat Bush even with that, and he really only beat him because Ross Perot was in there. So it was very successful. He was smart enough to say, hit him on why he's wrong. Here's how I would do better. Nothing specific, just endorsements of me. The Nobel laureates think I'm smart, and he still barely got through, but he did win.
Right, correct. So I think I agree with both you and Anand. So
not fair.
So I think that Democrats do need to sell a positive and aspirational vision for this country. And I do use the word purposely, sell, because that's what you're doing. You're selling to voters. I do think they need to do it in the context of how you have proposed. First, you attack Trump and outline the danger that he poses to this country, and not just about his rhetoric. There needs to be more time spent on the devastating policy actions that he's taken, what he's doing to our environment, which gets very little attention. So Democrats need to hit him on those things that are right to hit him on, that are righteous to hit him on. pivot to their positive and aspirational message of what they would do differently than what he's doing now to draw that contrast.
Does it need to be like, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to completely remake healthcare, and I'm going to do this, this, and that? Or is it more of a general, we're going to be there to make sure you have healthcare. We're going to protect the healthcare you already have. We're the ones who are going to roll back those trade tariffs that are hurting your farms. Like, does it have to be so specific?
I don't think it can be that specific because the debate formats don't allow for that. Right. So you have to be able to to provide your message, to offer your message in a way that's very concise and very compelling. So I don't think the formats allow for that. Where people have an opportunity to do that is at their rallies, at their events when they meet with different constituents, and that's what they are doing in certain types of ads, like YouTube ads, where you have where you can go a minute, right? So that's where Democrats have the opportunity to do that. But on that debate stage, I think that it needs to be much more of a drawing that sharp contrast, outlining how dangerous Trump, his rhetoric and policies are for this country, what they would do differently in a concise manner. And also, one other point I want to make. Democrats need to own the mistakes that they have made in whatever with their records. They need to say, I think, how I would tell if I was coaching them, I would say, look, here's how you want to make your point. Have I made some mistakes? Of course I did. I've had a long career in politics, but I've learned from those mistakes. And here's what I'm going to do differently. And the other thing is to talk about the fact I've done a lot of things right.
Right.
And I am proud of those things I've done right. I've done this, this, and this. But I think where they run into problems is when they try to defend Joe Biden. We saw him try to defend things that really aren't very defensible at this stage.
Yeah. And but the other thing, you know, Cornell Belcher, I'm going to go to you on this, my numbers guy here. It's not clear to me that I can see the upside of saying I've made some mistakes and here's what I'm going to do differently. I don't see the upside of saying here's a whole bunch of mistakes Obama made. Let me redo health care. Let me just play a little bit of these guys talking about essentially the idea that what we have now, which is Obama's health care, ain't even working. We got to change it. Here they are.
Vice President Biden. I didn't hear your response when the issue came up of all those deportations. You were Vice President of the United States.
Mr. Vice President, it looks like one of us has learned the lessons of the past and one of us hasn't.
Did you say those deportations were a good idea? Or did you go to the president and say, this is a mistake, we shouldn't do it? Which one?
I was Vice President. I am not the president. I keep my recommendation in private.
Mr. Vice President, you can't have it both ways. You invoke President Obama more than anybody in this campaign. You can't do it when it's convenient and then dodge it when it's not.
Cornell, I get that I agree that you need to disqualify the sitting president. I just don't think you need to disqualify the sitting president that was your president, that was in your party, and who ain't president no more.
Oh, well, Joy, there's a lot to unpack here. And understand, I'm frame of reference, I'm an Obama guy. I worked on both his campaigns from the very beginning through the primaries. So I'm going to get to that. But first, there's a couple things I need to unpack here. One, I agree with you that Anand's hair is fabulous. I disagree with you on
yours is too, though. I mean, honestly, to be fair, yours is too, in similar ways.
But I'm going to disagree with you that Democrats can criticize and make a critique of Trump while also talking about health care and other policy issues, because I do think it's important. But I also want to step back further than that. Look, it's a primary, and primary audiences are very different from a general election audience. So there's different things that they have to do, to win the primary and then pivot to the general election. If you're trying to win the Democratic primary, for better or worse, you're talking to Nerd Nation. You had better be talking about policy. Look, Democratic primary voters dislike Trump enormously, right? There's only so much you can say more about how much you dislike Trump. But you do have to, in fact, and I've seen it in focus groups, you do have to, in fact, pivot to policy for these narrow cast of voters who are actually voting in Dem primaries and in caucuses. So I do get that. On the general election, I do worry about this, Joy. I do worry that all the lessons of the Obama years, where we won back-to-back majorities, and tell me when the last time a Democrat did that, or even a Republican, I'll wait, won back-to-back majorities, because we threw out the establishment playbook. Because, in fact, our playbook was, in fact, from the very beginning about building a movement. When the first time I sat at a table with then Senator Obama, he talked about building a movement. A movement is not just about politics or policy. A movement is spiritual. A movement is about culture. Yes. And it's about expanding that electorate. And when you look at 2008, 11% of that electorate were new voters. And when you look at 2012, we expanded it even greater by winning, and at the same time winning less white voters than we did in 2008. Right. And you know, in 2008, we won the same amount of white voters as John Kerry did when he lost. So Democrats, I'm fearful that Democrats will go back to trying to run, in fact, the Clinton campaign all over again, and it'll be disaster.
Well, and I agree with you, because I put that caveat there, Jason, that they should not run the Clinton campaign. It's not the 90s. No. But the elements of the Clinton campaign that made sense, you have to disqualify the sitting president. In terms of the people that you're out there, watching happen out in the world, are any of them, in your view, building a movement?
No, none of them are, Joy. And some of this is about raw talent. First, I want to say I love this, that we have a consultant, a pollster, and a political scientist. This is the smartest hour on TV. I'm going to tell everybody this right now. But the other thing I'm going to add is this. Some of this is just, it's about raw talent. We can't expect anybody else to be Barack Obama, just like we can't expect anyone else to be Donald Trump, who has a 20-year history of being on television. Those are unique talent sets that you can't just recreate just because people are unhappy with the sitting president. But I can say this, and this is really important for Democrats to understand. This is an emotional election, right? Now, look, numbers are for nerds, right? And during the primary, you're talking to a bunch of nerds. But you've got to look at the candidate who's going to be able to emotionally get everybody else to invest when you get to a general election. Who's going to get people angry? Who's going to get people excited? Who's going to get people willing to run through a darn wall on their behalf? And one of the things that I always say, it's a very simple sort of political science term. It's called directional theory. And it's the idea that a president is often a bit to the right or a bit to the left of the median voter, and they drag people with them because the intensity with which they stand for their positions makes people say, you know what, I don't know if I'm in favor of that, but darn, that guy's really enthusiastic about it. So that's why I tend to be fairly critical, to be honest. And when you're talking about sort of the policy versus attacking Obama, look, the kind of moderate, middle-of-the-road thing is not going to work against Trump. You need to have someone who is equally extreme and enthusiastic on the Democratic side. That's the only way they can win.
Yep, and when we come back, let's argue about whether or not nobody's doing that, because I'm not sure I agree with you that nobody's doing it. But we're going to come back, and I'm going to debate this political scientist. Yeah, the panel is so good, so we're going to bring them all back. Everybody stay right there. Go get some coffee. Come right back. We'll be right back.